And I'm going to, I know it's a couple of minutes early, but I think today's discussion may go on for a while. And so I'm not sure. So I think what I will do is read our opening prayer. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Amen.
Amen.
And we usually we have actually completed our reading of the book of Genesis.
Excuse me, Marty, could
Yes.
we,
Yes, but before what I'm going to do,
okay.
I understand, David. I just want to say, but I think it's still important before we leave the book, there may be some ideas that different people have come up with, and then and so that we may be able to get more out of the book before we move on to how it has affected us and our thinking and what it means to us. I'm just leaving it wide open. With that, I'm going to give David the floor, and please.
Thank you so much, Marty. And Wendy is here, and she and I want to offer you all Shana Tova Tekatevu. May it be a sweet new year, a wonderful year, much better than the last one. Anyway, thank you. I would like to quote today from the book of Psalms, since we're celebrating the completion of Genesis. I would like to quote from the book of Psalms, Psalm 19, and I'm going to add a line to it. Song of David. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth his handiwork. Day unto day uttereth speech, and night unto night revealeth knowledge, so long as the sky is clear. Thank you.
I love it. Love that last line that you inserted.
Thank you.
That's good. Any other comments before we start our discussion? I thought it may be interesting to go back. Yeah. Oh, yes, Michael.
Can't hear you, Michael.
Michael, you're muted.
Yeah. I just wanted to pass this on. I hear information since it's 9/11 yesterday. Quite a few people talking about celebrating today. The word celebration in concert with 9/11, and it's remarkable to me that people talk like that. It's a celebration. It's an observance. It's an observance, bringing honor to the people who lost their lives, saving an innocent people. How could that be a celebration? It's just so, I can't help but had mentioned that it's so disgusting to me that people don't realize that people very often use the English language so incorrectly, and they try to make it right somehow. It's just remarkable to me, and I was just so compelled to say that. I just had to get it out of me.
Okay.
You're correct.
Thank you.
I agree with you, Mike.
I agree entirely. It's like December 7th.
Right.
And also was it June 6th?
June 6th.
That's right. And so you are very correct. I think that it's something to be remembered.
But that's it. That's all they need to be remembered.
One final word about that. What I heard it mostly from college students.
Yeah.
College students. You can believe that. Absolutely unremarkable in this country.
Interesting.
Whew.
Okay. Thank you very much, Michael. So what I thought we would do, I'm just going to get the ball rolling. There may have been your favorite passage or your favorite story in the book, and it got you thinking. And it certainly, this endeavor has gotten me to think about what we have been reading. To start, a few weeks ago, with the death of Jacob, there was a term that, and it is repeated again by Jacob, when he said he was able to defeat the Amorites with his bow and sword. And also, and we discussed that at great length, but it also comes up in the discussion about Joseph, when he gives the blessing, he's giving the blessings to all of his sons on his deathbed, and he says in his descriptions of Joseph, Joseph is a wild ass by spring, wild colts on a hillside. Archers bitterly assailed him. They shot at him and harried him. Yet his bow stayed taut, and his arms were made firm by the hands of the mighty one of Jacob. And it goes on. But I got to wondering about the term. We discussed bow and sword. Sorry for combining the two words. We discussed those as that there may have been some conflict, open warfare conflict that occurred between Jacob himself, not just his sons, but with Jacob and his sons. But then in the context of Joseph, it changed the concept of bow seems to relate to, again, Jacob's conflicts with himself and all of the events. And I'm wondering, where else do we read about the concept of a bow? And it brought me back to the to following the Great Flood and the description of the rainbow, a bow in the sky. And what do we recall this? This may be a stretch, but when we think of the rainbow, what is told to Noah after the rainbow?
That was a promise. I remember of a promise that God had made to the people.
Yes, it's a covenant.
Right, a covenant. And pretty much I see Genesis as the buildup of a covenant too.
So I was wondering now, if we go back to discussing what Jacob is referring to with his bow and sword, is he saying that he got with it, he's fighting the Amorites with a reminder of his covenant with God, the covenant that we are supposed to remember with God, and his strength instead of sword, just so it's God's might and Jacob's might. God's strength and Jacob's strength. And we when we discussed Jacob sitting in silence, did we neglect to talk about this? That's one. Oh, yes, Rabbi.
Marty, I just want to add one little
Please.
thing to
I know
it's analysis that you're doing.
Yeah.
That the rabbis point out not only in these verses that you're referring to, but the word for sword is cherev. Okay. But if you add one more letter onto that, if you add the vav into that, it becomes chorev, which is another word for Sinai. So the keshet, which is the rainbow as well as the archer's bow, and the cherev, which is the sword, but also is synonymized, if that's such a word, into chorev, which is the covenant at Sinai. So they all do tie together linguistically as well.
Yes, because if I recall, we haven't read it yet, but recollection from the past, the Amorites are nipping at the heels, if you will, of Moses. Am I correct? Or the Amalekites?
It's the
It's the Amalekites.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Moses or Joshua?
No, the Amalekites is with Moses,
Right.
and the Israelites is there.
Because the stories are, if you can see how some of there are parallels. Let's put it that way. There are some parallels in the stories and in future. And remember, we relate it to prophecy. And I'm wondering if this could talk about that. And then I want to thank you for that comment, because then Joseph's bow is his remembering the covenant. And it changes the entire picture of what we've been reading. It's not necessarily fighting a physical war. It's not necessarily, it's a spiritual war.
Spiritual, yeah.
And one of the things, if we, so I just want people to start thinking about this. In my mind, I start seeing certain threads here that are going to come up in different ways in future books and in the past with which we read. So I wanted to get people thinking along in, some different lines, and also other stories that you may find of interest or have found of interest. Yes, Don.
That's really interesting, Marty. It's a bit daunting at the end of Genesis to say, so what do you think? There's an awful lot there. And I didn't come in till I moved here about a year ago with the discussion. And so I try to catch up and then process what we're talking about in between sessions and read backwards and forwards and sidewards. But I first of all, I agree with you. Most of the warfare discussions are about spiritual warfare, not
That's right, absolutely.
physical battles. Certainly agree with that. Also, I came in around the time of the Akedah, which to me is the most profound of everything in Genesis. And I still can't come to terms with everything that happened in those few verses. But in doing some research around Abraham, he is said to have come from Ur, city Ur, where his father was. But then I found out a couple of days ago that Ur really didn't come into existence until around the time of David. So I'm thinking, okay, there is maybe some license here, and there has to be, because who knows who the narrator was. But it just brings me back to the fact that all discussion is about the spiritual warfare among the Israelites, and because if it were just physical warfare, we wouldn't be sitting here today talking about this.
Okay.
And one minor thing, and I always ask forgiveness because I'm really uneducated in these matters, and I tend to blurt what I think I've discovered. A comment Rabbi Miri made last week about how Jews are criticized because they think on the high holy days they just have to ask forgiveness and everything's cool again. And a couple of weeks before that, a Jewish friend of mine said, those Catholics, they think they can just go to confession and then everything's cool. So those kinds of things are, they're handy, but they don't really ever get to the heart of what it's all about.
Okay.
Excuse me, I just have a new rescue cat who's bugging me here. I forgot cats have all teeth and claws when they're home.
Okay. Okay. Rabbi Miri you mentioned her, and she had her hand up before Rabbi Norman. So I'm going to turn it over to Rabbi Miri and then Rabbi Norman.
Well, Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
But shalom.
My thinking is, and I think that by now you know that I'm a bit cynical, but we as a people feel uncomfortable with all the wars that are going to appear now. A lot of wars and a lot of conquest and a lot of actions that today we think are awful. So, we can call them it's spiritual wars. And we can say that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. But I think that we need to put the issue in the context of what we're talking about in the Torah and not to bring them to today. So you see, the Jews always fought. So that's it.
Okay. Rabbi Norman.
Don kind of caught me off guard in saying that he saw something that Ur wasn't recognized until David's time or whatever. I wasn't aware of that necessarily, but Ur in the ancient languages basically just meant metropolis.
Yeah.
It meant a major city. It don't not necessarily it's not like Superman comics where the name of the city was Metropolis. It was, a city or a major urban area in the Chaldees. So it may not have been the specific city. Later on, there may have been a specific city. That's the way that I was always taught and that I studied it. Back to Marty's very first question, the opening question. And I'll just throw this out as a little prelude or an invitation to be with us on Yom Kippur morning, when I always address what to me is the most important word in Bereshit, if not even in the entire Torah, and that's Hineni.
Right.
And that, here I am, count on me.
Oh, I love that.
Right.
Yeah.
Any comments about what the rabbi is saying? Yes, Rabbi Mary.
I'm not going to comment on that, but I want to bear in mind something that at one point in my life career, I discovered, and it was a very important piece for me. The word milchama, which is war, milchama, the source, the root is
Lechem.
lechem, which motzi lechem min haaretz, it's bread. And when we put these two things together, it gives us a lot of explanations and bringing it to the wars of today. So milchama and lechem are connected.
Very good. Very good. Thank you. Yes, Chris.
Yes, I'd like to ask Rabbi Mire if she will explain that again. You're talking about war and bread linking together. Wow, that's strange. That's one is necessity, one is life in one way, and war is death. That is so amazing that they will be together. Thank you. I just have to say that because it just doesn't fit. You know, it's not part of our way of thinking. But I'm gonna take advantage of my hand up, and I would like to. Excuse me.
Sure.
I like to think of the book of Genesis as the instruction book for humankind. God set up the rules, set up the laws, set up the agreements between man and him, and how does humanity respond to the whole setup. You know, there's times where they obey and I'm not sure obeying is the right word, maybe we trusted God at his word and everything moved along rightly. And there were other times where they refused to trust or believe that God had said this or that. And they kind of had to go about his own little wars and bread. Yeah, I have to fight my own war. I have to fight my own future, you know. And I think they said if we don't learn history, more likely it will repeat itself. And that is a great pattern of what we have done through lifetimes, generations after generations. We continue to fail and continue sometimes to listen and to remember more than the promises of God. And those are the ones that saves us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chris, how about if I say war and oil, O-I-L?
Yeah,
War
that's
and
right.
oil.
Okay,
That's
much
right.
better. Yeah.
That's
Or,
exactly
or water in our day, and water
Now
That's
as well.
these
right.
days,
That's
absolutely.
correct.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
So, yes, Michael.
Yeah, I just want to respond to Chris for a moment. War does not necessarily mean death all around. People go to war to save their own lives.
Agree.
So I
be.
understand, and believe me, I understand what you mean, Chris. It's a decent. What you said is a decent thing to say. Decent, very decent from your heart, but it's not necessarily accurate.
Totally agree. Yes.
Good points. Good points. Any other discussion? Okay. Chris, you alluded to something, and that
But Michael has had his hand up.
again. Michael, did you have
Let's have
something
his
more
hand
to
up.
say?
Yeah, are we going to continue the discussion on what the Torah means and all that? We're going to continue that, correct?
Yes, what we've been reading, yes, and how it relates to us as well, and to us personally.
Okay,
Okay. So whatever anybody wants as we go through this book, and there are a lot of different passages, and it may stimulate if everyone's comments, it becomes limited by time, then we will go on to do it next week because there are many topics for discussion. Chris, okay, Michael, go ahead, because
Yeah,
Chris, I just want to say that Chris mentioned something that dovetails in to the Noahide Laws. Okay, and we'll come back to that after Michael. So please, Michael.
okay. Yeah, I just wanted to make a very general comment on the Torah, just very general, and that is that these stories that we read throughout the Torah, it really enters our lives almost on a daily basis, and and for me, it teaches me if I'm in a certain situation and I need to figure something out or just go ahead and do something, I may just make a decision based on what was read in the Torah in a particular story, in a particular passage.
Mhm.
And I think that it just keeps us being striving to be the best we can and doing the right things at certain times in our lives. And that's the reason that we, when we come to the end and then we continue to go back, it's a reminder. It's a constant reminder to do what we need to do, because our lives, God willing, are long, and we get into certain situations that are a little difficult than others, and it's a reminder just to keep ourselves on a good track of life.
Gotcha.
Very good. Very good. Any other comments? So, Chris, you brought up the Noahide Laws. And what are the Noahide Laws?
Got me there. Don't remember those.
Well, to get people started, some people have said, and rabbinically, we've been told that the Noahide Laws come down after the flood.
Right. I believe that and understand that. Yeah.
So what is
What were
is
those laws? Okay.
that's right? Or is it a compilation throughout what has preceded in the book of Genesis?
Oh,
Okay, let's say we do know that humankind,
mhm.
okay, was sinful, that it was corrupt. Okay, did the passages go into any description of what corruption means?
The Ten Commandments, that's not what you're talking about, right?
Right. I'm speaking about the Noahide
The
Laws.
Noah laws. I am so sorry. I don't really know.
Well, what were they doing?
I'm sure they probably use the Ten Commandments for some kind of a regulation, but wait a minute, the Ten Commandments are not yet done.
Correct.
And then Noah has already passed. So, well, it was the oral law for from the creation to Noah, and I have no clue. Marty, help me there.
Okay, Rabbi, please.
Do you want me to list them?
Yes, please.
Please.
Okay. Believe in God. It depends if you want to cite them positively or negatively, but we'll do it negatively. Okay, so do not deny the existence of God. Do not speak against God. Okay? Do not murder. Do not participate in forbidden sexual practices. Do not steal. Do not eat from a live animal. And the one that is in the positive is to create a legal system for your society.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Those
Now,
those are the seven considered
and
considered for all the generations or the progeny of Noah.
Okay.
And then it becomes more specific into the people who develop into the Israelites,
Into Israelite, right.
or the Hebrews, then the Israelites, right?
very
Right.
good,
Thank
very
you.
good.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Got it. Thank you, Rabbi. I will remember that.
Okay.
Yes, David. David?
Well, thank you. Thank you, Marty. I just wanted to add on Chris's comparison of the Noachian laws that came down after the flood to the 10 Commandments. Actually, the Torah does not list 10 commandments. It lists 613 commandments, of
Right.
which
Right.
the basic 10 are numbers 25 to 34, I believe. But in any event, when I was a little kid at the Jewish National Home for Asthmatic Children in Denver, our rabbi there taught us that the very first of the 613 commandments comes very early in Genesis. And essentially what it says is to get married and have children.
Yeah, I
Wendy
remember.
and I
No, leave out the
followed
get
that
married
and
part.
No,
That
no
is-
married part.
He
Just
taught the
to-
children about getting married, but actually,
Yeah, yeah,
Well, in
yeah.
any event,
Be
that
fruitful and multiply.
was 1962. But in any event, the idea of the be fruitful and multiply is the foundation, is one of the foundations of our faith. And Wendy and I did follow the first part of it. We did get married in 1997, and we adopted a lovely daughter. And now we have a family that I have to say includes 2 lovely grandchildren. So I think we've tried to follow that. But I just wanted to sort of add that in, that there are really 613 commandments that we have to follow.
Right.
Right. So now David mentioned something that is interesting. So what other passages do we have that support the contention that it's all spelled out from creation all the way through the Noah story, that that the Noahide laws have been explained? Any comments? To get you started, do not murder. Okay, we can jump right into the story of Cain and Abel.
Right.
Okay. So what about cursing your creator? Or not speaking against God's will or anything like that?
Well, I think there was another rebellion going on in there with Cain and God, when he told them, "Am I my brother's keeper?" In other words, I don't care what you think, but I am not going to do what you want, perhaps. Disrespectfully, I would say. God is trying to convince him to change his ways personally, and to not to yield to sin, not to yield to his anger, because I think that was his problem, anger and jealousy, more than the fruit that we talked about so much. But the offering, in other words. So I would think that was being arrogant toward God, and that would be a sin to me, I would say.
Well, basically, go ahead, Don, please.
Looking back on how the commandments developed right from, I mean, Cain, it seems to me Cain didn't really know it was wrong to murder his brother. I mean, there was nothing written down. I mean, unfortunately, morality isn't built into our genes. You know, it has to be sent to us by some external media. We have to be told what to do and what not to do. But going back to that earlier period, there wasn't really much, there certainly wasn't anything written down that I could see. You know, there were commandments transmitted ad hoc, but then a lot of people suffered without really knowing, you know, what to do and what not to do. You know, like the flood was pretty severe, considering that nobody really understood what how to prevent that. Okay, just tell me what to do and don't do that again. And then God said, well, I won't do that again. So it seems to me that it wasn't until we get, well, I know we haven't got to the foot of Mount Sinai yet, but it wasn't until then that anything was really codified or set down where the average person could understand what was expected of him or her, except by tradition.
Okay, Chris.
I believe that when God created Adam and Eve, were given basic instructions. Maybe they're not all written down in Torah like we read them, but I believe they were told not to eat of this plant, not to do that. They could do this, they could do that. So I think we all are born with the conscious of knowing some kind of level of good and evil. I don't think we're just completely oblivious of, oh, I can kill this ant and be all right with it. Or we do know that we just did something terrible to kill an ant or to hurt an animal or to disobey our parents. And nobody told us you don't disobey your parents. You just know they're your elders and you know they're your family. And if your mom says, go do this, that's exactly what it means to me anyway. So I think that our nature and our heart has the basics written down in it. Now we know that we should not hurt our brothers or our sisters. And if we do, you know, there will be consequences. I'm just going by what I feel is normal and natural of human beings.
Okay.
I even think people that commit horrible crimes, I think they know they're committing those horrible crimes, but they are sick and either they cannot stop or you know, it's something in their nature that is blocked, cannot see what they're doing. I guess, I don't know. That's a heavy one.
I appreciate that. Rabbi Mary.
And I think that we need to think, what was the chapter before Noah?
Okay.
It was the Tower of Babel, or
Right.
Babel. And if we
Arrogance.
think about what happened there, I think that we can understand a little bit about the relationship between God and human beings, or the behavior of human beings, that eventually brings Noah, that there was the least bad guy in that era, to survive.
Okay. Tell us more about the Tower of Babel. You brought that in the story. Would you like to say a few words about that?
Well, a lot of people that spoke different languages, assuming that they were from different, not countries, nations, started building this tower to get to God. So here we have a lot of metaphors that can be worked into relationship between the humans and relationship. Okay, you want to go all the way to God, just like Jacob saw the angels going up
Mm-hmm.
to God. And on Shabbat, we say the Shekhinah is above us. So that's my thinking about misbehavior. That it was not intentional to misbehave.
Okay. Now, Rabbi Mary, there was another reason why. Is there in the past, and also during and over the past several years, you've also commented about the stories being our myth, a collection of our myths. Okay. So I have to ask you about the spiritual side of, we can talk about man's arrogance and things like that. But what does it mean in what way would man be arrogant trying to reach the same level as God?
Yeah. God is one, we cannot be God, we cannot reach God, and metaphorically, we cannot. And the other way that, again, my cynic side is that a lot of people, nations, people tell their myth. The story of Babel and the story of Noah and the story of the flood appears in their culture. So that tells us something about the importance of these two stories, that they reveal something very, very important to the spiritual past that we're going to encounter.
Very interesting. Very good. Yes, Rabbi Roman.
Two things. One is with the story of Babel, is the ones who built the tower didn't. Their goal was not to reach God. Their goal was to become as God.
As God, right.
Right. So they weren't spiritually uplifting themselves. They were, that's more into I think the word you were using, more of the arrogance.
That's the arrogance.
The other is I always question, and Rabbi Miri led us into the recognition that many of these stories, the oral stories, were around amongst all these peoples and all these cultures. And then our tradition came first orally, and then finally was written down. And I guess we would say today it was to add a particular, excuse that I'm using the word in a literary way, to add a particular bias. This is the way that we should understand the story as Hebrews, Israelites, Judeans, Jews, whatever. That remember this story that everybody talks about? When we tell the story, this is the context for understanding it as Jews. Cain and Abel, there are cultures that look at the Cain and Abel story and say, wait a minute, no one had ever died before. How can you accuse Cain of killing his brother when he didn't even know what death was? Okay, and then you start to understand the story about a little differently until you get to Hashomer Achi Anochi. Am I my brother's keeper? And Judaism comes along and says, yes, you are your brother's keeper. Even if you don't understand what's going on, you still have a responsibility. And that's the way that we look at the stories, especially in Genesis, and all the family dynamics and all the relationships amongst each other and the relationships to God, as someone was saying before.
Thank you, Rabbi. That was a good
Very
one.
good. Very good. Yes, Don.
Just going back to the Tower of Babel again, there was a unity that was just broken up. Maybe it was just too much hubris.
Excuse me, Don, I'm going to be chutzpahdik and not polite. Is there any way that you can get closer to your microphone?
Yeah, is that better?
Much better. Yes.
Okay, sorry. If only I had known. So the Tower of Babel, if we look back then and now we look forward to today, we have a crew of people from all different countries circling the Earth in the International Space Station, and who may in a few years be setting up shop on Mars or another one on the moon. We are immersed in invisible electromagnetic waves that our cell phones tap into. We are sitting in the middle of all these technological miracles that none of us really understand that much. We just kind of live with it and use it. That's a long leap from Babel. And I wonder if, are we violating commandments right now just through our technical lives? Are we, should we be expecting to be punished because we're just the same way that the inhabitants of Babel were punished? There's definitely a parallel there, and I sure don't know the answer to that question, but I can see we're right there, right in the same place.
Any takers on what Don just said?
There are some who say that yes,
Yeah.
we are being punished in
That has come up.
many ways, but there are more, I think, on a positive, who say no, we're exploring to try to make life better for God's creatures. Are we going to make mistakes? Yes, we're going to make mistakes, but I don't think the Jewish understanding or the mainstream Jewish understanding is that we're, to use the expression for this season, that we're sinning in doing any of this. That's my take. Marty asked if anybody wanted to accept the.
No, I like the discussion. Yes, Suzanne. Suzanne hasn't had a chance to say anything yet, and then I'll go to Michael.
Okay. I don't see us as sinning by exploring God's creation. However, what I do see as something similar to the Tower of Babel is that, what the heck do you call it? That collider that's in Europe.
Yes, the Large Hadron Collider.
Yes, that.
CERN collider.
Yes, I do see as akin to the Tower of Babel, but certainly not going to the moon or Mars or any of that.
Okay, Michael, and then David. Oh, that's a Wendy hand, so it's Wendy. Okay. so first Michael and then Wendy.
Yeah, in regards a little bit to what Rabbi Roman was talking about, and Don, I would say that it would be more of a mitzvah when we travel out into space and look for things, based on what you said, Marty, about making things better for mankind. That's why that's the basis for all of this that's going on. And so man is risking their lives to better mankind for the future, I would say to think of it in those terms.
Okay. Very good. Okay. Yes, David. Or Wendy.
It's Wendy.
It's me. I basically Michael and I are on the same page. Because I was the other night, if you first of all, let's take this from the education ed biz. What are the goals are different. That the Tower of Babel was to be up there with God, or be godlike, and the
That's what
goal
the rabbi
of
pointed
our
out.
space program is to just be out and explore the other worlds if we get there. And the other night, when we were doing one of our unclub observing sessions with all the kids, one of them came up to me and said, "Boy, don't you think it's terrible that these billionaires are spending all this money so they can get into space?" And I looked at him and said, "Why don't you compare it to the pioneers? They've got more money than NASA, and because they can get up there, that means NASA can now work off it, and we can have pioneers get out further into space." So there's totally different views on this, and no one told the pioneers they were doing a horizontal Tower of Babel. So that was my take.
Okay. So, yes, Rabbi Mary.
There is no beginning and late in the Torah, so I'm going forward. When Abraham is told, Lech Lecha, he said, you're going to go to a place that you don't know, but God is going to show it to you. So the issue of wanting to explore or to move forward into the unknown maybe is a characteristic that we have of discovery. So that's what came to my mind as we were talking about going to Mars or going to the moon or going to the West.
Okay. If we are fashioned by God in his image.
In her image.
Okay.
Their image.
I'm sorry, I'm going with the biblical interpretations and the reading. But yes, I know some of the other comments here. But if we are, if man is made in God's image, is God like this?
Like what?
Is God very much, does God entertain the same feelings that we feel? Do we get our feelings from God? Or are our feelings a matter of choice? In other words, is this destiny or choice? Chris?
I hear you say that we are created in the images of God, but God is not created in our image. So,
okay, that's what I was getting after.
Okay, yeah. So we have our failures and we have our shortcomings. God is perfect in his own way. So I would say, yes, we'll try to resemble. It's our effort to resemble the ways of God, but I don't think we have anywhere near arrived to that place.
Yes, Suzanne.
I think God has feelings. I mean, that's
absolutely
demonstrated in the Torah. Now we know that he's flat out said he's a jealous God because he doesn't want us worshiping any other gods. We know that he loves us because he says so.
Absolutely, yes.
And I just lost what I wanted to say. But in any event, I do think that we got, as part of our image from him, I do think our feelings also come from him.
Okay, Rabbi Norman, and then
let Grace join in. I think her hand.
Okay, Grace, you go first.
Oh, thank you. So I'm going to kind of step off the path for a moment because Don inspired me with the use of cell phones, cellular devices, electronics, computers, all of that. You know, we're pinging off these satellites that are existing entirely to help ourselves. We wouldn't even be able to have this meeting online virtually if we didn't have those available to us. And these little tools that I have, you heard a beeping sound a moment ago. It's not a cell phone, right? So I'm on a travel. I got to plug in my battery. Hang on. I'm traveling. I'm getting through TSA. And I have equipment that I carry with me that cannot go through X-ray. So I'm adamant about this. I'm saying, no, you cannot, you will ruin my devices. They cannot be turned off, right? They're electronic devices. It looks like a cell phone. I'm arguing with the TSA agent. I said, no, ma'am, it's not a cell phone. No, it's a device used to deliver my insulin. It has a Bluetooth in it that can't be turned off. I turn it off, I could get very sick, right? So it is a lot of what we have today in existence is because of people like the NASA space station scientists. What I found very interesting about what Marty was sharing is that we have these group of people, international people from all walks of life on the earth together in this capsule, gazillion miles away, days and hours and weeks away from here we are, right? If I had had this technology 50 years ago, my life would be very different today. You know, so it is about exploration for myself. You know, I like to accept everybody's ideas around it. But for me, especially medically, you know, I need these devices to exist. And if I didn't have them, well, I would either be institutionalized on all kinds of machines or dead. So my choices are, I can use this, I pay for it, but I use it and I need it. And if I didn't have it, you know, I wouldn't exist. And if I didn't have internet, I wouldn't have you in my life. So I'm very grateful for that. So thank you.
Thank you, Grace. Yes, Rabbi.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I'm grateful for what Grace is saying, and that's what I was trying to imply before. That yes, there undoubtedly there are people who are using the exploration and investigation and whatever for their own egotistical, you know, or sense of power or influence or whatever it might be, or affluence. But for the most part, the Jewish point of view is that yes, we certainly are whether it's lech lecha, but we certainly are challenged to explore and investigate and try to do what we can to make life better, as I said, for all of God's creatures. But I want to come back to something, and it started with Miri's jumping into Marty and whatever about, you know, he, she, and they and whatever and the language, and Marty said, yeah, but I'm basing it on the original. No, you're not. You were basing it on the original English, not on the original.
That's true.
On the original Hebrew, okay, which really is neutered, if you will. But it allows me to remind all of us that this is something. This is an insight that I keep on coming back to, and it helps me accept that by definition. And somebody said, well, God is, I think maybe Chris said, well, God is perfect and we are not. That's true. And similarly, our language, whether it's English or Hebrew or any other language, language is a human endeavor. Therefore, it is imperfect. And therefore, it's going to have lapses and cannot fully or accurately describe what is non-human in that sense. So I think what Marty may have said, well, does God have the same feelings, and does God have the same characteristics that and attributes that human beings do? And we all say yes, but God's justice and God's mercy and God's compassion and God's jealousy and what all those adjectives that we use, we agree are different than human justice and human mercy and human compassion and human jealousy and anger. We just don't have the right vocabulary because our vocabulary is based on our experiences, not on God's experiences. So we have to kind of take that step back and just recognize that our language sometimes is leading us astray and leading us into different interpretations of who, what, how God actually is. Having said that, there's a little bug flying around. I have to
Oh, okay. We'll excuse your hand.
Something about it. Pardon me if I all of a sudden I'm laughing. Okay.
Okay, David, you're muted, David. David, you're muted.
There he is.
I should be
Now
unmuted
you're
by
okay.
now.
Okay, now you're okay.
Anyway, what I wanted to thank Rabbi Roman for his comment, but my comment deals with Grace's story. And I think we all want to know what happened. Did the TSA let you take your device with you without shutting it off finally?
Absolutely. Yes, because I had to demo
Great.
it and say, you know, I've already, each one of a 5-pack of insulin pods, which is a pump that I wear, delivers my medication, is about $700 a pack. 5. I have insurance that covers a majority of it, but I didn't find that out until after I'd let them x-ray it before. And the company that I do business with, when I told them I put on 4 different pods today and none of them are working. And they asked me, by chance, has it been x-rayed? And I said, yes, it was. We'll send you a new one right now. So they had to send me a new device, which is a PDM. It's a personal diabetes management. It looks just like a cell phone, right? And then the other one is a receiver, and my phone receives that too. So now in January, I get upgraded to a whole new system that's they're going to talk to each other. So hopefully I'll be a little better controlled. But they cannot go through x-ray. The pods can't go through x-ray. My devices cannot go through x-rays because they have to be communicating. And when they get x-rayed, guess what? The space station falls out of the sky. So that's just a metaphor for you. Anyway, that's been my experience. And so I have to be adamant with them and explain. I just do it as gently as I can. And I try and get to the airport 2 hours before I have to be on a flight for that very reason.
Interesting.
Well, thank
Don,
you.
Thank
so
you.
much.
Don, you had your hand up before, and then Chris.
Yeah, first of all, thank you, Rabbi Norm, for that guidance on language, because we only have our 5 senses to detect everything, and language doesn't really do a good job of getting to the 5 senses. And one of the great blessings of this study for me is the Hebrew, learning how the Hebrew represents what's in the Torah, and not the translations. So I listen really closely as soon as language gets discussed. And also I note that in the Torah, the prophets have maybe that 6th channel to God, and they can put a little extra twist on, getting at the meaning of what God is intending for us.
Okay.
So I really appreciate when this discussion gets into the difference between the Greek and the Hebrew and English and the Hebrew.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Chris.
Just a suggestion, Anita. Maybe you can carry a medical sign-up paper that says that equipment cannot be put through the metal detectors or radiation, because I work at the airport and we had plenty of people. They had one thing or another, and they brought in their permission from the doctor or the certification from the doctor stating that that equipment was valuable or sensitive to all these things. We didn't bother. Once we had a signature of a doctor, that was pretty much, we believe them. So that might be something you might want to do for future, to avoid to get there 2 hours early to explain yourself. So there is ways to do that. So just for your people.
And I have those devices in a bag all to themselves, and I just tell them this cannot be X-rayed. And then they take me through, and they have to hand pat me down and examine my body. So it's just been one of those things. I wasn't aware that my doctor I wasn't even aware that they were sensitive to the X-ray machine. It's
Right.
particularly the X-ray machine that I've only been using these new devices for a couple of years, and they've been around for 17 years. So
Just for your information.
I appreciate that. I do.
Okay, you may want to continue the discussion by email or texting,
Sure.
just so that we can get back on track. I wanted to ask another question. Mary, I'm sorry, Rabbi Mary.
Don, I congratulate you on wanting to study Hebrew and the translations, because I want to address that for a second. When we read about the creation of the human, you know that there are two, one that we learn in Sunday school and one that they skip, because it's not very appropriate. In any case, the first one, it says Va'ivra, which is bara, which is created the world. This is what it says in the very beginning, and it was Tovavu, and God created bara. And the other one, it says Yatsar, which is the same. In my translation, both words are used as the same. Now, you know that in modern Hebrew, what we do is we take, if something new comes, like the computer, we look for a word in the Torah that we can use for computer and not say that. So it's called machshev. It's something that thinks. So that's the computer. But the word yatsar implies today on creativity. Now, creativity is to create, is creativity. Now, as an artist, and Michael will join me, I think, that for creativity, for creation, it's a special, not quality, it's a special stuff, something. And here we have that issue of maybe giving the human beings not a face, not tselem, because in Hebrew, modern Hebrew, tselem, tsalam is photograph. So it's not that we look like God,
Right.
but we have that sense, as you were talking about, going forward, inventing. You see, Grace, the inventing, the yitzaratiyut, the yatsar. And at this point, when God creates the human beings, there is no model. How shall I do it? How it's going to look? How it's going to behave? I can think, well, the only word that it can be used is, I'm creating something from nada, nil, how do we say? I
Nothing.
don't know
Yeah.
this word.
Yeah.
From nil. It was something from nothing. It was tabula rasa. And here God needs to say, okay, I did the lion, I did the snake. What shall I do now? I know what I want, but I don't know how it's going to look. I don't know how it's going to behave. So then we can talk about maybe it's the issue of creating, because that's what God was doing in these 2 chapters. Now I talk too much, sorry.
No, I love it. Thank you, Robin. Thank you. That was wonderful, Rabbi Mire. Thank you.
Okay, now before we continue in this, I want to cover a couple of more concepts, ideas. I had started out by talking about, does man have the same emotions? Does God have emotions? Why does he, what's the story of the rainbow?
A promise that God doesn't want to do the same thing again, to cause harm, or to protect his people,
Well, God had the emotion of anger. God
Yeah.
had the emotion of anger.
Yes.
And we always have read our God is a wrathful God. And we're also created in God's image, so maybe we have that capacity as well. Yes, Ruth Ann.
Just going to say, I think emotion is something that was part of creation, and not necessarily all emotions were given to all things. But, you talk about other living things, okay? Whether you want to say, the dog is fearful, the cat's fearful. Even last night we were playing miniature golf and the little bugs were running around. I mean, you can say whatever you want to, we give them different names, but isn't that the emotion of fear? I mean, it's like God gave everything emotion. And to say that God doesn't have emotion, I mean, this is something that God must have thought was very important, period, because it was given to all her creatures, from the amoeba on up. So, I think we've got to remember that it's not just us and God that have emotions. It was fundamental.
Very, very good point. Yes, David, that's a windy hand.
That's Wendy.
Yes, it is. I went to Hebrew school for a lot of years, and I was not a good student, but there are a few things that I thought were interesting enough that they sort of etched themselves in my brain. And one of those was the story of the rainbow, or the bris, the covenant with Noah, that God would not do some kind of a flood like he just did. And that was that. Now they may have been wrong, but that was what I learned when I was not a very good scholar, but in Hebrew school.
That's a good point. So you're saying sort of that God realized that his anger was a mistake? That he wound up doing something? He says, I won't do this ever again.
Oh, I'm mute.
No.
We didn't get into big discussions, in Hebrew school, but that was, they told the stories, and that was what I learned. And I didn't look into things a lot, but that was my big memory. I thought that was pretty neat.
Okay.
And one thing I could add to what Wendy said is that the flood actually, not that specific flood, but the Noachian flood does have a simile in science. Catastrophism is the theory that a lot of the development or evolution of life on Earth was changed, stopped, or sped up by these floods that are caused probably by asteroid and comet impacts into the oceans of the Earth.
Okay.
And just, I think that's something that that is pretty interesting. I wanted to add that. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you.
Rabbinic prerogative. I need to jump in.
Please do, Rabbi.
Oh, okay. Contrary to Wendy's Hebrew school teachers and whatever, the whole thing of Keshet and the rainbow signifying or reminding people, whenever you see the rainbow, remember that there is a brit, not remember that I did this, or whether I, intentionally, whether I'm sorry I did it, whatever. Remember that there's a brit, that there's a covenant, and a covenant has two sides, two parties that participate in it. Okay. God says, I will no longer do it. I would prefer not to have to destroy the world, but you got to do your part also.
That's right.
It's not just up to me. And that's what the rainbow, that's what the rainbow signifies. And that's, doesn't mean that every time we see a rainbow, there's been a flood somewhere. It's the rainbow, as often as we might see it, rather infrequently in Arizona, but when we do see it, it's a reminder that we're participating in the brit, in the covenant.
Covenant, right.
And
I'll step
it
back.
is, and it's for everyone,
Yes.
not just.
That's right. That's right.
There's a difference between the 10 Commandments and the Noahide Laws.
Right.
Before I recognize Michael and Don, I'd like to just add something. If we see how the story of Genesis unfolds, it is God, by recognizing what can happen if his wrath, if he lets it be uncontrolled, he can destroy things. One, is that a lesson for us? Is another lesson that if we're made in God's image, if God can repent and recognize things, are we also to, and this dovetails into Yom Kippur, this whole 10 days, why, are we expected, should we expect ourselves to be able to forgive ourselves, to forgive others, forgive things that, and this is right out of the Yom Kippur prayers.
Right.
The Amidah. Yes, please, Rabbi. You had. Well,
I wanted to
it.
be able to get to Michael, but to Levi Yitzchak and Berditchev makes an agreement in this story. Makes an agreement with God. Okay, well, if you forgive me, or us, we'll forgive you. And But there's also the image, and it's in the prayer book. I don't have a page number in front of me, but whatever. But it's in the prayer book, the Midrash, that God, in essence, examines God's own actions and says, my Yom Kippur prayer is that my feelings or my emotions or instincts towards compassion will outweigh my instincts, towards anger and wrath. So yes, if God has that same feeling, we're entitled, or we're commanded to have the same feeling.
That's great.
Good point. Yes. Okay, Michael, then Don. Thank you, Rabbi. Very good.
In regards to what Rabbi said before, does this apply? God helps those. I have two things. God helps those who help themselves, right? God helps.
That's one of the teachings.
Yes.
I'd like to believe that it's a truism.
Okay. The other thing is that I want to respond to what Ruth Ann said about emotion. And what do you think the emotions of God was during the Holocaust of the 1930s, where 6 million Jews were murdered?
sorrow.
Well, that your question, the silence answers your question.
Unfortunately, yeah.
That reminds me of the Cain and Abel story too, right? Silence says a lot. Yes, thank you, Michael. Yes,
Don,
Suzanne, I keep
Don,
Ruth,
what's
Susan, Joanne, everybody. Okay, yes, Suzanne.
In answer to Michael's question, besides being very sad, I think God was also very angry at what happened. I believe there will come a day of judgment for that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your comments. Yes, Don, I'm sorry I skipped over you.
It's okay. There's so many things raised since my original question that I have to, what was I going to ask? Oh yeah, coming back to emotions and feelings. I mean, we all have feelings. God gave us all probably the same feelings, and we're just accountable for how we act on those feelings.
Mhm.
We're all going to feel them. And it's just what we do about them. It's what we're accountable for. And I always think back to how Abraham, the first time, made God accountable for his anger in destroying Sodom and Gomorrah, because he negotiated down to 10 righteous citizens that would protect the entire city. I thought that had to be the first time in the Torah that God was restrained from acting on his feelings. But regardless, I mean, that's what we're accountable for. We're going to feel everything. We're going to feel anger, and we're going to feel love. We're going to feel the whole spectrum of feelings. But it's what we do. I think that's what it's all about.
So compassion, that I'm reminded of Abraham asking God to remember his feeling of compassion,
Mhm.
okay, and maybe temper his judgment. And that's what I get from that part of the story.
Marty, I'm not sure that it's compassion. It's justice. It's not. I don't remember the.
Oh, it
text.
is. The story is justice, but the argument that Abraham is making is show some compassion.
Right.
Well, that may be his motivation, but I don't think.
But God still goes through.
I don't think he's chutzpahdik enough to say to talk to God about compassion. That may be his motivation.
No,
He
it
says
was
It's
to
Abraham's
God,
motivation.
the one who judges all the earth should not you do justly?
Mm-hmm.
right.
Yes, Suzanne.
Yeah, in that story, with Abraham, God assured Abraham that he would not destroy the city if there were any righteous people, even one. But what God did was he removed the righteous people. And then that gave him he was free and clear to exercise his judgment on Sodom and Gomorrah. I thought that was pretty clever.
Another good point. So we have several different ways of viewing this, but what about sometimes when we go through a series of bad events, we tend to say, well, if there was a God, why would he have allowed this to happen?
Mhm.
Okay, or why me?
Right.
These types of arguments. Is that fair to say that? Or do we have to say it and then realize even the limitations okay, that we have in saying it. Yes, Chris.
I love the way you put that, because for every day that we are blessed, every day that we have what we have, every day that we enjoy good health and good things, we are not so eager sometimes to say, why me, oh God? What have I done today that I deserve any of this? On the contrary, we only pick on him on the things that didn't go just so well. And I think he rejoices when he sees us being grateful, even for those terrible days where we are not really being Wonder Womans or Supermans, and we have everything we need. And I really think that we need to be more mature believers in what God has given us, instead of just parking in the why me, oh God, or why our people, or why this or that. I personally feel that way, because we need to be more grateful that yes, we went through this, but we overcome. We are again a nation. We're again your people, and try to jump over that situation. I just recently I did something really, really stupid. I canceled all my medications and decided I was going to go raw completely. And it was not a very good idea. Needless to say, I had a lot of effects going on in my body that it was due because I've been taking medication for so many years, and now I decided to go cold turkey. And some of the medication, you don't do that. So needless to say, I was dying. I felt that I was dying. I had already pictured my plot, pictured, abandoning my family or leaving my family behind and all of that. And I realized that I was grateful that God had given me so much throughout my lifetime that I felt okay if this was my time to go. It was okay if this was as far as I was going to go. And I felt so grateful in my heart that that I had settled peace between me and my family and whatever is around me. And I'm okay, thank God. They fixed me back up on my stuff that I needed to take, and I'm back again on the swing. But it was a great opportunity for me to say, ready, and I'm not afraid. And I just give thanks to God that he was giving me that opportunity to see where am I standing. Is my material stuff that important to me, or my life that important to me? And it isn't. My relationship with my fellow beings and my God, far more important than anything else. So I didn't mean to share that much. I'm sorry.
It's okay, Chris. And, I appreciate you sharing all of that with us. And I'm sure what you mentioned is going to help others who may be going through other types of situations, not identical,
Right.
but you in sharing that, it helps us all stop and think.
Right.
So you've done a good mitzvah by sharing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, Michael, you had your hand up, and then Don.
Yeah,
Oh, wait a
just-
minute.
I think
I guess I'm losing some peripheral vision. I forgot, David had his hand up, but he had two hands up before. So I think he wants to say something, but he's going to let Wendy say something first. Yes, David. Yes,
No,
Wendy.
it's me.
Okay.
Oh, one of the things, and Chris, I was listening to you and I thought, I've been there,
Yeah.
when something was really wrong, and about 8 or 9 years ago, I was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer. And my first thought, Chris, was, I'm gonna die. And I have been, and it surprised me when they had medications that were good enough that I've been living a pretty good life. But what the real question I asked was not why, but what am I learning from this? What was the blessing to give me this awful thing?
Yeah.
And I realized what I learned from it was I was always a supportive friend for people. Like if you came up to me and I had not lived your experience, I would have been right there with you, giving you the big hug. But what I learned was the compassion of the really internal compassion, what they're going through. And it made me, for example, not afraid to talk to someone who's dying or a cancer patient that's having a hard time. And it's made that part of my life easier. And it also showed me that I really wanted to live. So the question is not why, it's what did I learn? What lessons are there?
Exactly.
Very, very good point. Yes,
Thank
David.
you, Wendy. Thank you.
David, did you want to add anything? You had raised two hands before.
I cannot add any. I had lots of wonderful things to add, but I cannot add anything to what Chris said. That was a very moving thing, and I cannot add anything to what Wendy said. Also, very moving statement. So
Yes.
I pass.
Yeah.
Okay. Don?
Just going to circle around back to us being made in God's image. Personally, I think we are really close to being put to the test because we are really close to producing a robot.
Yeah.
That is self-aware, in which case we would have created a replica of ourselves. And then we are faced with what on a moral basis, then what do we do? So we may be created in God's image to the extent that we can actually create ourselves, images of ourselves, and then have to equip whatever we create with a moral sense. And I mean, I don't know. I don't think personally, I don't think we're up to that. I don't think we have what it takes.
Isaac Asimov would be very proud of you.
Yeah.
Okay. He wrote a whole series. I, Robot is only one of many books on the subject.
I know that, but we are way closer now than he ever would have thought. I think.
Wow.
That's right. Yes, Michael.
So Chris, we often hear that we hear that God is testing us. God is always testing us. And that would be, I would say to Chris, God was testing you. He wanted to see which way you're going to go for whatever reason. God picks and chooses what he wants to do. And so you honored God, and the other person you honored was, I suppose you're on medication, so I assume they're all prescribed by a physician. You must have a primary doctor. So you honored your doctor also, because he would have been very dismayed if, God forbid, something would happen to you. So you did some real good things there. And if you weren't around, I would miss your beautiful face. You don't want to do that to me.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you.
Listen, I'm not always right, but I'm never wrong. Just remember that.
Okay.
Okay.
I like that.
Any other comments? Okay. So if we are to do this, Chris also gave us a hidden message. God has to forgive. We ask God to forgive us. God expects us to think about forgiving God. God forgives himself. Does he expect us all also to forgive ourselves? We, in our discussions with Joseph, in the Joseph story about forgiveness, things cannot move on until we forgive. The story cannot progress. Too many things are unanswered. And so with all of the turmoil that we see around us, maybe it's worthwhile considering that maybe God does know best. And maybe,
Absolutely. Yeah.
you know, from that standpoint, maybe we need that external source
Mhm. Oh, yeah.
to get us back on track. I don't know. I've opened the door to many types of discussions right now. I've just, so any takers on any of those comments?
Mhm.
So Chris, you really have helped quite a bit with what you said, and I appreciate that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other stories that, yes, Rabbi Mary?
I experienced, I think, very, very close to today, the issue of forgiveness. And I shared with you last week the issue of revenge. And
Yeah.
it seems to me that both of them are kind of the opposite of what we do with an action that happened. This happens to me, now I'm going to take revenge. This happened to me and I'm going to ask for forgiveness. I can tell you personally that ask for forgiveness has been very, very, very difficult.
Yeah.
And it wasn't Beini Uven God. It was human being, but it was like the story about carrying the woman along. So you need to listen to Rabbi Norman during Yom Kippur. It might help.
Yeah. What? So you heard me say at some point that we were going to have a discussion between the Genesis and, oh yes, go ahead, Chris.
I'm sorry, Marty, but I can't. I have to agree with Rabbi Mary in regard to how difficult it is to ask forgiveness, especially if you think you were wrongdoing too. Especially if you think they really did it to you. And I had been in that position where I didn't do anything, but yet the little voice kept telling me, you better ask for forgiveness. And guess what? I knew that little voice was right. Not because this person offended me, but because I had held resentment in my heart toward that person. So I had to be responsible for my brother's keeper. I really did. I expected that person to be the one to ask an apology to me. Instead, I was asked to be the bigger person, to ask for forgiveness, and it had nothing to do with what that person did to me, but it was the way I was feeling about what she did to me. And I was totally shocked that when I did do what the little voice told me to do, ask for forgiveness, this lady threw her arms around me and she said, oh, please forgive me too. Totally unexpected. And we became best friends. It was just amazing that the response was totally out of this world. And I had peace about it. But it was very difficult. I had to fight the feelings of but I didn't do anything. I kept saying that, but it's true. You have to listen to that voice that speaks within your heart, that tells you what needs to happen. And I am grateful that I did what I did.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that. So in the past, I've mentioned that I see a relationship with the book of Genesis and the 10 commandments that are going to come from us in future books, come down from God to us
Right.
in future books that we'll be reading. The basis, somebody mentioned before that the basis of it were the Noahide Laws.
Right.
Okay. So these are rules and regulations. That's one way of looking at them. Or is there another way to look at them? And I don't mean suggestions. Okay. Is there another way? Because each of us at one point or another have had bad thoughts. Even Suzanne's cat has had a bad thought every now and then. But what is it that we have that the cat doesn't have?
Right.
We can talk about abilities, but it's our cortex. I have a massive cortex. And however we got there to this point, if we want to deal with evolution, or we say that God granted this to us, that's fine. And we've spoken about to use it.
Remorse?
And remorse and everything that we've covered that topic. But why are the 10 commandments? And if anyone wants to address any one of them at any time, that's okay. But I know we've gone over a lot of those in previous weeks and everything. So Rabbi Mary, please.
Well, what comes to me is it reminds me of a big mistakes that people do when they talk about the two important trees in the Garden of Eden. One is for life and death, and the other people say is for living forever, which it's not what it says. What it says is, this is the tree that when you eat it, you can know good and bad. And that's other people call your conscience. But you can, at that point, we were able to know good and bad. And in my mind, it's crucial.
Good point. Yes, Rabbi Norman, please.
You're putting, I'm not sure yet where we're
It doesn't
going
matter.
by putting it into the 10 commandments. But the difference between, at least the way that the rabbis see it, the difference between all of the other creatures that that God formed in the story of creation, and then it says Vayhi Tov, or Vayar Elohim Ki Tov, that God saw that it was good. Then when it comes to male and female created together, God saw that it's Tov Me'od. Okay, very good, we say in English, but the ma'od, you might remember that Hebrew word from V'ahavta. Okay, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. And the might doesn't mean power, strength. The might means morality.
Right.
The might means that's the distinction between those who respond to life strictly with animal instinct or lust or whatever verb you want to use, as opposed to human beings where we focus on our me'od, on what is the difference between us and the animals.
And the
What makes us human? Yes, conscience, you know, whatever kind of words we use. And if you're leading into the Ten Commandments, again, I'm not really sure, other than these are the choices. You said something about
Right.
suggestion, but these are the choices that human beings make based on the strength, if you will, of your me'od, you know, of what makes you different than the animals or than other creatures. That might be a
So-
little too homiletical, but that's the way the rabbis see it.
Well, this is what I was moving towards. It's something that humans can do, but the cat cannot do.
Right.
It's something that the amoeba cannot do, and everything in between, and the plants, the bacteria and the plants, whatever. They can't do something, and they cannot think about the consequences of what they say or what they do.
Mhm.
Right.
We have that ability.
Well, we have that innate ability.
Yes,
The animal may have an instinct, but it's not right or wrong.
correct.
Right.
You know, whether I need the food, whether I need to find shelter, things like that. Yeah.
Now, we also know that God does have other emotions other than anger
Yeah,
in the book of Genesis, because he said the translation is, he says all of his actions were good
mhm,
after he makes the earth, he makes the plants, he makes the animals, he makes man, the whole works, and everything is good. And that has to come from emotion, and that
mhm,
emotion we've addressed as love.
right.
Okay, so you get this feeling that there's something more to this whole thing. Why the Ten Commandments? Why, and everything? Why do we, why? And I know we've discussed murder at length. So honor your mother and father, or committing adultery. We've had some discussion about this. But what is if you don't have a little bit of the thought, wouldn't life be very much like the Garden of Eden and never
Absolutely, yeah.
have any discoveries? If you didn't have that little bit, we always talk of having the devil and the angel, the good and bad. Always go with the good side. Well, if you did that, you'd be angelic, and you wouldn't need punishment. Everything would be fine. Anything you want would be given to you. But what would that do to the human spirit?
Well, it helps you keep everything in perspective.
Very good. Yes.
I think so.
Yes, Don.
First of all, cats believe that human beings were created to serve them, so that's not a good example. I think that creativity is very closely associated with imagination and being able to foresee consequences, which humans seem to have the edge on. Because, I mean, God was created because he created everything, he created us. But we create too, and by creating, we can imagine what comes next. What we do this might happen. If we do that, the other thing might happen. And that's supposed to protect us from our own sins. It doesn't always work. But I think what we, just to answer your question, I think it comes down to creativity in its various forms.
Yes, we've been discussing that. And so we need a little bit of that maybe. But the point is, it's a spectrum. If you go to the extreme,
Right.
you can really, steal, commit theft. But but when you create something new, that means you're still borrowing on something old. You're still building on top of that.
Yeah.
So you, in a way, you are still using someone else's idea. In Judaism, what I love about Talmud, everything is attributed to someone. Having said something, according to this rabbi, according to that rabbi, or whoever. So we give credit, but we recognize this, that we can still build on it.
Right.
Okay. Yes, Michael, you've had your hand up for a while.
Oh, no, that's okay. Before we get to the end, may I mention something? Just go off a sidebar for a moment.
Does it pertain to what we're discussing, or can we hold on to that till the very end?
Yeah, to the end, right.
Okay, we'll give you some time at the end. Okay, let's do that. We got 10. So any comments about the use of our of ways of tempering? We ask God to temper his judgment. What can man do in tempering all of his desires?
Mm-hmm.
Well,
We recognize this.
the same three answers that we use in the liturgy for towards God. I mean, of doing positive, righteous acts,
Right.
prayer, which is in the sense of
Right.
self improvement,
That's
if
it.
you will, and assisting society, tzedakah, of not just charity, but doing the righteous things for society. I'm going to have to excuse myself. I have to make a phone call.
Okay.
I apologize.
Thank
but I do
you.
wish everyone Gemar Chatima Tova, an easy fast, and hope to see most of you, if not all of you, on Yom Kippur as well. And Shabbat
Thank
Shalom.
you. Thank you for your input and what you have mentioned to me. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Appreciate you. Thank you, Rabbi.
And so maybe it's that we recognize we're always going to be
Learning.
We're always going to have the ability to think of something that maybe it's not the best thing, but we also have the power to wait a while, learning from Jacob's actions and contemplate everything so that it doesn't come out in the wrong way. Like his sons to take care of that. And, his sons don't really think about their actions. They just do them. I'm talking of Simon and Levi. Okay, so I think that there's tremendous, and I think each one of these,
Marty, I want to share with the group, and I'll do it quickly. That one of the things that for me was left in my heart and brain from Bereshit, from Genesis, was the fight of Yaakov, of Jacob, and struggling with God.
Yes.
Struggling.
Okay.
That's a very strong statement.
Excellent. That could take an hour's discussion in and of itself.
Can we do that next week?
Sure, I don't mind it, whatever the group wants. But I think that we just need to realize that the foundations for the 10 Commandments are all in the book of Genesis.
Mhm.
Okay, so there was a method to my madness. And so I think I'll stop at that point. I know Michael wanted to, I'll come back to this. I know Michael wanted to mention something, and then I want to come back to what we can do next week. Go ahead, Michael.
No, I'm going to just forget about it. I wanted, in particular, the rabbi to hear what I wanted to say, so he could. That's why I mentioned before it was getting late, and I was watching the timing of everything, and I kind of knew, and I didn't want to argue with you, Marty, so I just let it go. And I kind of knew that people were going to be leaving, so what I had to say, I think, has some merit, and I wanted to get feedback from the rabbi. He's not there, so I'm not saying anything, but thank you.
Okay. Well, sometimes I'll say things that are provocative, intentionally provocative, because I want people to challenge those things, those ideas too. Okay, so sometimes I do that as well. But do you want to have more discussion on the book of Genesis next week like this, or do you want to move on? I'll let the group decide. You can't get out of not voting.
Let's continue this.
So how many people want to continue this discussion about some of the lessons from the book of Genesis?
I'm okay with it. Yeah.
Okay.
I want to continue.
Because there are tons of ways of interpreting things.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't, it's just nothing is really wrong. Yes, Ruth Ann. And how many want to move on to the next book? One person. Okay. Okay.
I want to just go one more week of, with Genesis and discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then let's move on.
Would that be acceptable? I mean, let's do another week of, let's, kind of wrap it up and look at it and discuss it. Because it's, it is a foundation. It's a foundation of who we are as human to carry on. And I love that you said that. That's what I was thinking. However, I'm pretty excited. I'd like to get into Exodus as well. So.
We will.
Well,
So
Marty,
if yes, Ruth.
I was just gonna say, in one way, I mean, even though it's a different book, but if we wait till Simchas Torah to start Exodus, it's like, okay, that's when you're supposed to be starting the Torah anyhow, so we could start, reading the next book at that point. It's kind of appropriate,
Right.
and it's so close. But I wanted to say something to the group too. I got a very nice email from Mike Mussman the other day, and he said he would very much like to join us on a more regular basis, but he wants to know where we are in our studies, so he can prepare. Now, I don't know how you can prepare for 2 words, which is sometimes all we do, but he feels guilty that he doesn't prepare. So I want somebody, to please help me keep track of where we leave off, so that I can send it out to him and other people. There could be other people too who feel the same way he does.
Okay.
And second, Bev agrees. Okay, Bev
Bev
agrees.
will do it.
And second, David sent me an email while we were doing Torah studies here, and he asked me to share it with the group. And I know me, and by the time I turn off the computer and I go make lunch and I go do this and I go do that, I'm going to forget. So Marty, give me a couple of minutes when you're finished. Let me share this with the group, if that's okay with David, and everybody can read it.
Okay. So you have the floor?
Okay, you ready?
Yes.
This is from David. Okay, I need to find my share screen if I go to the right spot. Come on, you. Why can't I find it? There it is, because it's big and green.
It actually
and
may be
nothing
easier
else
just
is.
to email it to us.
Okay, can everybody see it?
Yeah,
Yes.
Okay, just let me know when you're finished. There's just a little bit more at the bottom.
No. Well. move.
The part at the bottom, that's the important part.
Oh, okay.
oh, wow.
Oh, I saw this. Yes. Very, very interesting.
Yeah.
Makes, well, this is a good, I,
Can you move it up a
David,
little?
thank
Move
you.
it down.
Yes, I saw this. This is an interesting,
Okay.
thank you very much
Wait, let me,
for
let me,
mentioning
let me
that.
move it
Yeah.
down so you can see the
The
bottom.
the bottom part, yeah.
But I had to get out of it to get back into it.
Okay.
No,
Technology.
No, she's going to the bottom.
Okay.
Come on. Thank you. And now I'm talking to the computer.
You're not
Okay.
alone.
It's another thing. You talk about cats thinking people serve it. You know, I think computers, we built computers, we designed computers to serve people, but I think people now serve computers.
Interesting. Next week, could we
Oh,
all,
that's sweet.
could we
Thank you.
discuss, David, thank you for this.
Thank you, thank you.
But
David.
next week, could we please discuss the word serve?